There's nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. Welcome to The Bleeders, a podcast and support group about book writing and publishing. I'm writer and podcaster Courtney Kosak, and each week I'll bring you new conversations with authors, agents, and publishers about how to write and sell books. So Bleeders, summer school is now in session, and I'm doing something a little different. I'm trying to write a freaking book, and I've discovered that's very hard to do while producing 3 podcasts. So I had already batched a bunch of interviews for you guys. I was very excited to release them, and that's what I'm gonna do. I did it all in advance. It's all ready for you. So, long story short, this is how it's gonna go down. I am gonna serve you up a mini-sode every Monday. Okay, let's call it a flash podcast in literary terms. And it's gonna offer a delicious sample or a key lesson from the full conversation. It's gonna be shorter, okay? And then the full interview is over on the newly launched YouTube channel for The Bleeders, which is really cute. It's really fun to watch everybody. So I think you'll enjoy that. And yes, I am going on 40 and I am launching a YouTube channel. There's no shame in my game. The handle on YouTube is @Bleeders Podcast. You have to use the @ sign. It's stupid, but it's how it works. So again, youtube.com/@Bleeders Podcast. And make sure you subscribe over there so that you can stay up on the latest. And without further ado, our instructor for today is...
Hi, my name is John Small, and I am the producer and host of the Write About Now podcast. You can find out all about me at writeaboutnowmedia.com. I am also an editor-at-large at entrepreneur.com. And if you look me up, you'll find all my bylines there. Okay,
so this is a very interesting fact about you, but you used to be Jake. Tell us about this.
So, yes, in the 90s and in the early 2000s, I was Jake. Jake is, sometimes people think it's called Ask Jake, but it really is just Jake. And Jake is this fictional character that was created by Glamour magazine to basically it's an advice column where he gives advice to lovelorn women from a male perspective. It seems very, very dated now when I even talk about it, but in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was still pretty cool. And I got a job as senior editor of Glamour, I think in 1999. And I asked the editor-in-chief, Bonnie Fuller, at that time, if I could take over the Jake columns. They had been freelancing it out. And she said, sure. And there was never one Jake. You know, there's been many of us. In fact, I think we should start like a Facebook group or something like the Jakes. Because there's been a lot of us. But it's always in the same voice somewhat. He's kind of like a little bit of a bad boy. And, you know, he's just like, this is the way it is, you know, kind of thing. But he's also got a heart, you know. So they asked me to write Jake. And it was totally my thing for months where basically they would say, you know, every month we'd have to come up with a topic. And when you work at Glamour magazine, at least when I worked at Glamour magazine, I was one of like 3 men and a staff of about 120 women. So we would sit around this huge conference table and kind of brainstorm ideas. And they would tell me about all their terrible dating things and sort of send me like ideas. And I'd go back to the drawing board. And then I would write these columns about, you know, what was on my mind. I think the first one I wrote, and it's not like these were so innovative, was like
No, but this was kind of an iconic thing. Like
it was an iconic thing.
You know, there wasn't like as much social media or online stuff then. And so these magazines were like big and
they were big. And I will meet women of a certain age who will tell me like, oh my God, I like lived and died by your column when I was, you know, 16. It makes me feel, it's usually more like when they were 13, because the little secret of Glamour is even though it's supposed to be for like 20-year-olds, like really the people who read that magazine are like 15 and 16 and the people who read 17 are actually 12. So It was kind of like, you know, a much younger audience than we pretend that we were catering to. But yeah, I had found this little niche before Jake of writing about women and about dating from a male perspective, because I was also, when I was working at Child Magazine, just as a little callback to my days at Child Magazine, the magazine on the same floor was this magazine called YM. I don't know if you read YM.
Of course I read YM.
So YM was on the same floor. So here I was like by day writing about, you know, parenting tips and best children's books to get your kid. And by night I was friends with all the editors at YM and they'd be like, you should write, we need more guy stuff. So they would give me these assignments, these freelance assignments to like write about dating, what you can tell about your girl by the kind of salad that she orders, and how to know, does he dig you? Is he about to break up with you? Like 10 signs. And it was all these kinds of stories. So I had been prepped. It wasn't like I just came to the Jake cold. I had actually been writing that kind of a story for a long time and had sort of carved out this weird niche for myself and was kind of known as the guy that could do those kinds of stories. And so then when Jake came along, it was kind of like, oh, well, this is a natural progression. Now I have my own column at a famous magazine. And it was awesome. And it lasted until I left Glamour. And I left Glamour fairly quickly because I got a job at a magazine called Stuff Magazine, which was for men.
Yeah.
And then started writing a different type of story for like sort of more, it's so interesting, the difference between advice that you give guys and the advice you give women. It was like from a different universe. It was like the advice for women was all about how to like form a connection and, are we friends and how do I get past the friend zone? And the advice for guys was all like foreplay and less than, get through. Yeah. How to get through foreplay, quickly. Forget foreplay. Here's how to, how to date a model. And it was awful. But
in retrospect, was your advice to either audience good?
I think it was good. I think that I'm a little bit embarrassed by the stuff I wrote for Stuff because I feel like it was insensitive. We were very careful actually not to be too over the top misogynistic, but it certainly wasn't like.
But that was the time. This was like Girls Gone Wild time.
Yeah, this was the Girls Gone Wild. We were always very sensitive to not being too like bro. Like it was always more funny than real advice. But still, it was not. I'm not proud of it. So I recently looked at the Jake stuff, and there's not too much stuff I would to say differently. I mean, it's just very like cookie cutter. It's just like man and woman cis relationship, right? There's never any like stuff that's beyond the kind of classic, dating paradigm of, of that time. And now things are so different. I mean, with, polyamory and open relationships and bisexuality. And I mean, my kids' generation, it's just a completely different thing. So, I mean, first of all, I doubt that Jake would be a white male anymore. It would just be too like cliche. I don't know. It's almost too old school.
Well, who is a columnist for Cosmo, I think, that I recently interviewed is Zachary Zane, and he is a white guy, but he is bi and goes to sex parties and just wrote a book called Boy Slut.
Nice.
And all of his advice is like poly-friendly, bi-friendly.
Yeah. So he's like more modern. And maybe I would have been that guy in 1999. Who knows? But that kind of guy was not as much of a thing. So yes, I definitely have aged out of that particular. But I went with the stages of my life because right now I'm a dad with 2 teenagers. So I don't think I'm going to be writing about like sex parties and orgies and I mean, I'd like to be. I would love to be. We just have to get my wife involved somehow.
All right, Bleeders, that was just a little preview. The whole interview is so good and it's over on YouTube. So again, you go to youtube.com/@bleederspodcast. That is youtube.com/@bleederspodcast for the full conversation. You're going to love it. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Bleeders. Writing is so much better with friends. I'm your host, Courtney Kosak, and hey, let's connect on social media. I am at Courtney Kosak, that is Kosak, on Twitter and Instagram. And you can follow the show on the new show accounts at Bleeders Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And make sure you're signed up for the Bleeders Companion Substack. The link is in the episode description for that. And if you could do me a huge solid and leave a 5-star rating and review. I have a goal for the summer to get to 50 ratings on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And as of this recording, I am at 7 and 20 respectively. And you can totally help me out by leaving a 5-star rating and a review if it's possible. On Spotify, you just go to the upper left-hand corner of the Bleeders page, you click the star button, and you click all 5 stars. And it really helps elevate the level of guests that we can get. So I'm hoping in the fall we can just like next level of guest booking. And I feel like we've already had such amazing people on the show. So please leave a rating and review. I would be eternally grateful. And join me again next week for another all-new episode. In the meantime, happy bleeding.